we are joined, the man himself, the man of the hour, Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, and the host of TMI, Too Much Information, with the one, the only, the great Manila Chan, from 10 to 12, every day, Monday through Friday. Ted, man, how you doing this morning? You doing all right?
I'm good. I had my eye burned yesterday on purpose, so it was good.
You say your eye burned on purpose? What do you mean?
I had a growth on my eyelid. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, like one of these things, like, sort of like anyway. It's been there for years, and it was like yesterday was the day. It's like, there's not room in here for the two of us. You've got to go. So, so they take this very, they burn it off, they cauterize it. So they use a tiny little hot poker, and there's like, and anyway, it's kind of like it's your eye, and it's really hot, so it's not that comfortable. But it's like a spite thing where you're like, yeah, that's right, it hurts, get out, because he's like an invading force. It's like a body snatcher. It's like, why are you here? Get off my eye.
It's amazing, so much stuff associated with the physical body. I mean, like, and you have to think all that stuff has to work right, otherwise something goes wrong. And I know this sounds funny, but if you think of like all of these little, like if you're building software, you have all of these little programs, and you may have this massive software application, but you may have like a million different sub algorithms that are basically running. And if any of those things go wrong, something is going to be screwed up. And the body is very similar. Like you can have one cell that's doing something that becomes cancerous, that starts taking over other cells. And you're like, it's so complicated. Like like that's the religious argument, right? Like it's hard to fathom that atoms will cobble together to make a cell, that will cobble together to make a tissue, like an organ, that will cobble together to make, and it's like all of these little subsets, and then it grows into this bigger thing. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around that.
Totally.
And how that would happen. But again, over the span of the universe, I suppose, it's hard to wrap your head around.
It also kind of belies intelligent design.
Yes. Yeah. It does. I mean, and I know some people may say
order in the universe. I'm like, where do you see order in the universe?
People. I mean, I don't know. That gets into a religious argument. I'm not Christian or anything like that, but I think there is something, like even getting into esoteric studies, like if you're like OBEs or remote viewing or stuff like that, that stuff is fascinating.
Totally.
And it gets across, there's something there. Even if I don't know what it is, I can put my finger on it. Speaking of something there, that's a bad transition, but fair enough, I'll go with it. Donald Trump is really talking about this 51st state stuff, and it's threatening Canada with economic force. So I want to go to two clips. The first clip is where he's talking about
military force against Greenland.
Panama, yes. Effectively saying Greenland and Panama needs to come under U.S. control. So let's go to this one first. I think this is the Greenland one. All right. I am astonished by this because I don't know what he's getting at here. And, on some level, as I keep pointing out, Europe brought this stuff on themselves. This is Trump. And I believe this is the one he's talking about Greenland.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. You have approximately 45,000 people there. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world. I'm talking about protecting the free world. You don't even need binoculars. You look outside, you have China ships all over the place. You have Russian ships all over the place. We're not letting that happen. We're not letting it happen.
Not letting what happen? I mean, what is like? What do you mean not letting what happen? What is happening right now? I don't know what's happening. And then he's like, I mean, I get it, right? He's making this kind of military argument, and then to say we're doing it for the free world. You should give us Greenland for the free world. Hey, you should give us Canada because I'm representing and fighting for the free world. What a ludicrous argument to make. But that is the argument Europe is making in Ukraine, right? We are doing this because if Putin doesn't do it, he's going to take it all. We're fighting in Ukraine for the free world. That argument is outrageous and saying they should just give it to us because of it. What? I mean, this was not something that was brought up during the election. This just came out of the blue. What do you think he's doing here? Is this deflection? Is this? I don't know how to place this. Give me your thoughts on this, Ted.
Well, I mean, Donald Trump talks a lot of crap, right? So whoever knows if this is that or not. I mean, you look, the Ukraine argument, which I have never bought, but at least it's a coherent argument, which is it's kind of analogous to it's the we've got to fight them there, we're going to fight them further west, argument. It's like give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Next thing you know, they're going to be in Prague. Okay, I mean, I understand the argument. I don't buy it, but there's no evidence to support it. But okay, I mean, it makes sense anyway. This is a typical Trumpian kind of like, you fill in the blanks because he's not going to provide you with the details. He's going to use a lot of vague stuff. Like when you're dealing with someone who's kind of like a little, kind of a little loopy, and you're trying to like make sense for them. And he knows he's doing that. He's not stupid. He's doing that to like, well, do it for the free world. And it's like, so you're like, well, what does he mean by that? So does he mean that the American Navy needs to be able to pass through what will be the Northwest Passage after the ice cap is gone 365 days a year? Is that what he means? I mean, I think, that's where I go, right? But other people would go elsewhere. He talks about the Chinese and Russian ships. Russia already has the domination over the Arctic because of their geography. I mean, they have all the ports in Siberia, right? I mean, you just look at a map of the North Pole and you'll just, like Russia, this is Russia's like to lose, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, okay, I don't know what he's talking about. Like they don't need Greenland. So it's like, and then the whole like, well, we need it. We don't know if Denmark has no one knows if Denmark has a legal claim. Well, I think the UN knows that Denmark has a legal claim. Yeah. I think the Greenlanders know that Denmark has a legal claim.
It's like, I don't even know if they own it.
It's a colony, So is Puerto Rico. So is Hawaii, right? I mean, so is California,
Yeah. It's like, I don't even know if they own it. I don't, who knows if they own it? It's only a few thousand people there. We need it. We're not going to let them do it. It's like, let them do what? What are they doing?
And Denmark's not part of the free world? What did they ever do?
It's so weird. It's just so out the blue. Well, I think what it tells us though is this notion of American invincibility is a myth, and he knows it. Like I could never expect, no one would have ever intended 20 years ago that an American president would come out and say, we're going to take Greenland and Canada. Like just outlandish. Like on some level.
Exciting. It's undeniably exciting, right? I mean, Jamal, I'm older than you, but when I was a kid in school, and I'm sure you had this experience too, when you learned like, why are there 50 stars on the flag, right? It's like, so it's like one for each state. Every time they added a new state, and you saw the old flags and all the different configurations. And I remember being a kid. I'm born in 1963, so the last state was only 3 years before I was born. So I remember, and I remember thinking like, so like there could be, how would they do the 51 state flag? Throughout when I was a little kid, there was a lot of thought Puerto Rico would end up becoming the 51st state, or maybe DC in the 80s. And so, it wasn't really outlandish at the time. It was like, well, throughout our whole history, almost 250 years next year, we've been expansionist, and so it's kind of like, but that stopped in 1960, and we don't amend the Constitution anymore. We don't add any more stars to the flag. We don't expand, and it's like, well, and so there's the sense like we're kind of like Europe now. We're like stopped. I'm fine with it, but I think that it's part of national mythology. This taps into something that is really fundamentally American. Maybe it's really white American. It's certain kind of white American. But
that goes back to like this colonial stuff, right? Where you're just taking countries. I mean, it seems like we got to a certain point on the global stage where we realize, hey, stealing countries is not necessarily a good thing, especially when the people don't want you to do it. And so we have this kind of
what we consider profitable.
I think we consider it to be civilization. Like it's a civilized way of engaging. And so to turn around and say, we're going to take Greenland, or we're going to take Canada. And then he even points out, he says, no, we don't have a right to it. But, so what? Like right here, when they ask him, the reporter's like, well, why do you have a right to it? And his response is like, well, I didn't say we had a right to it. Just saying we want it.
Well, that's frankly, he's being more honest. I mean, that's true about every inch of land that is in the United States today. It was never ours.
Yes.
We just took it.
Yes.
All of it. I mean, it's
I accept the honesty.
Israel has the right to exist. No country has a right to exist. It's like a country exists if it can take territory and hold it. That's it.
Right. It's a muscular issue. It's the power. It's not, which is goes to the whole thing of Europe, right? It's like, what is Denmark going to do if Donald Trump decides to take it? This is him. I think they ask him about Canada in this clip. And listen to what he says. I'm like, he is pulling this out of his ass. And I guess my thing is, it's like, you didn't bring this up over any point in the election. And now all of a sudden you're about Greenland to Canada.
Right. Good point.
Considering military force to acquire Panama and Greenland, are you also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada?
No, economic force, because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. But here's the problem with Canada. So many friends up there. I love the Canadian people. They're great. But we're spending hundreds of billions a year to protect it. We're spending hundreds of billions a year to take care of Canada. We lose in trade deficits. We're losing massive. We don't need their cars. They make.
And then he goes for another several minutes trashing Canada, saying, oh, we protect them militarily, and they're taking advantage of us, and we don't need their cars, we don't need their wheat, we don't need their whatever. And he spends like minutes just trashing Canada, saying, hey man, we shouldn't have to protect them at all. Why are we doing this? Why do we have a trade deficit? We shouldn't take anything from them if they don't want to join us as a 51st state.
I don't know what he's talking about. We need them for national security. I never thought of Canada as our soft northern flank. I mean, it's like they're coming in that way. Like, I don't really think so. Whoever they are. But also, my favorite part here is the artificial line. This is a man who's literally president-elect of the United States because of an artificial line on the southern border, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's important. We can't have anyone come over that border at all, or if we do, we have to control it really much more rigidly. This is like, well, if that's an artificial, if 5440 or fight is an artificial border, then so is clearly the U.S.-Mexico border, which is not even, which we stole through several wars. I mean,
right.
It's like, what? I mean, what is he talking about? I mean,
all lines are artificial by definition. I mean, states are just legal fictions.
Right.
But you're right. If you're going to make that,
and
right. Right. If you acknowledge it for one, on some level, you're stuck with acknowledging for the other.
By the way, just parenthetically, I would think that Canada would really be like each province would probably become a state. But,
Well, he's an entire state. I think he called Trudeau Governor Trudeau. Jabbing him with the first state. And then he makes this other thing where he talks about Trudeau coming to Mar-a-Lago, and that Trudeau was crying at Mar-a-Lago when Trump said he was going to put sanctions on Canada. Like, this stuff is just outrageous. I guess my thing is, why is he saying this? Why is he doing this? Like, why is this all of a sudden his focal point? Donald Trump got in and said he's going to end the war. And then the moment that he gets elected, this nonsense comes up. Why not say this a year ago? Why not say this 6 months ago? Like, meaning, why is he bringing in Canada, Greenland, and Panama Canal now? It's very bizarre.
Nobody knows what goes on between that left ear and the right ear of Donald Trump. But I mean, speculating, I think this all really goes to Panama. The Panama Canal has had to throttle their traffic because of the drought, and they've had a shortage of, as you know, they can't send as many ships through there, so they've been increasing the passage fees. I think that's when Trump started. Someone briefed him on that, and then he started to get annoyed that the United States was going to have, sort of higher shipping and, costs through the Panama Canal. And that got him thinking about all these other things. Like, why do we ever give that away anyway? Also, Panama Canal's in the news because of the death of Jimmy Carter, who signed the Panama Canal Treaty. So I think that kind of like got him going, and got him thinking about these things. Donald Trump knows that, like, he's not running a political party or a presidency. He runs a movement, and a movement has to be exciting. A movement has to always make news, even if it's dumb news. But it's like something that's going to get the cameras there and people like us to say, "Holy crap! What the hell is going on?" That's exactly what Donald Trump wants and needs, and he's not wrong. Just think about how, like, we basically, under Joe Biden, for 4 years, we haven't really had a president at all. And then, and it's been boring as hell, right? It's been like, there's a sense of no one at the helm. Well, you don't really have a sense that this is leadership, but man, as the band, The Jam said, that's entertainment,
It is entertainment. I guess I just wish it was galvanized to something that mattered. Like,
right.
It's one thing if you say, I'm going to pass Medicare for all, and it becomes this big thing. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something big. I'm going to do something bold. I'm going to do something and bring people in and make people.
I'm going to eliminate homelessness.
I'm going to eliminate homelessness. Again, another one, right? This is what we're going to do
for everyone.
Something big, bold, something that is like a shining city on a hill type thing. This is nonsense. Yes. Can he militarily take Greenland? Yeah, I'm pretty sure the U.S. military that we spend $1 trillion can take Greenland. Europe can't do anything about it one way or the other. Even if all of Europe military got involved, they couldn't do anything.
It's a part of NATO, so we would have to defend Greenland against ourselves under our Article 5 treaty obligation.
I guess this is how sad Europe has gotten. And this goes to this. Somebody on Twitter pointed out this is the year of humiliation for Europe. And that Europe effectively has allowed itself to be put into this kind of humiliating spot. If you think about it, we effectively defend Europe. Europe can't do anything without the U.S. say so. Even Zelensky, when Zelensky was having a conversation with Les Friedman, and he points out, Europe looks at us and we look at America. Why? Because at the end of the day, we are going to be the ones who make the choice one way or the other about whether or not there's a deal in Ukraine, not Europe. Russia doesn't even talk to Europe at this point because there's no reason to. Like, they are effectively a vassal state. They're an occupied territory. Even if you look at the gas, what did Trump do? Trump came out and says, you're going to buy more LNG from us or else. Okay, now think about that for a moment. We blow up their pipeline. We sell them energy 5 times more than what they were paying for prior, meaning they now have to spend 5 times more for energy from us after we blow up their pipeline. They can never own it. It's safe that the U.S. blew up the pipeline, so they blame Ukraine. So on top of sending Ukraine hundreds of billions of dollars, meaning Europe, they now have to pay energy costs 5 times more because of the pipeline that they're claiming that Ukraine blew up. And to make it even worse, Ukraine decides you are no longer going to get energy through our transit. So now you're going to have to pay even more money for energy. And Donald Trump is telling them, well, you need to buy it from us or else. Think of how ridiculous of a position that these world leaders in Europe have allowed themselves to be in. And so for Trump looks at it as, well, if they're pushovers for this, why wouldn't they be pushovers for Denmark or for Greenland? Why not? What can they do about it? They're a pushover for everything else. Meaning they've allowed themselves to be in this kind of vassal, weak position where it's as if they don't have a foreign policy of their own that works in their own interests. It's utterly bizarre.
Well, you're 100% right, Jamal. And what really brings it home to me is thinking about the origins of the EU. Well, of course, the idea was originally Hitler's. People forget that. But like the idea of the modern EU, which emerged in the late 70s, under the Brussels Pact and all that stuff, and then emerged under the first EU, which was sort of run by France and Germany together, and then spread. That EU was the whole purpose of it, right? It was sold to the Europeans as and I remember this because I voted in that election. I'm a French national, so I voted against the EU, by the way, in favor of French sovereignty. And the point is that, like, they said, they said, well, we have to be able to take on the United States as a hegemon, an economic and political hegemon. In at least in France, I mean, every European country has its own story, but in France, this is like the DNA of it goes back to Charles de Gaulle kicking NATO out of Paris, which is why it's in Brussels. Like, we were a great power before World War II. Just because our American friends helped us in World War II does not mean we should be their dog forever. Right. So, we're France, we have greatness. Germany, we have greatness. Spain, we have greatness. So, like, the idea was we're going to pull it all together. We're going to be as big or a bigger trading bloc and a military union eventually, maybe a political union as well, against the United States. This was supposed to be an anti-American project. Now, the practical effect of it has become, in short order, the Americans are not only still running the show, but it's actually easier for them because now, instead of having to call around and push the Czechs around and the Romanians around and so on, they just make one phone call, right? It's like, it's easier. It's like to be just like, this is Big Don, take care of it. And he is rolling like a Don, right? I mean, that's his thing. This is gangster, right? Do what I say, and or else, and and give me more money, or else. That's all it's about. And Americans love it because they've seen the movies. They appreciate it. They kind of feel like, I mean, maybe not all Americans. I don't appreciate it. I think we're just one country out of 200. But they're like, well, we're the biggest, baddest country. We were all taught that in school. We should get all the toys. That's the thinking.
It is deeply humiliating. Like, it's shockingly humiliating for Europe in this situation. Like, think for example, the war, the Syrian war. We decide under Obama that we want to overthrow the Syrian government. You got all of these people streaming out of Syria and ended up going into Europe. This ends up destabilizing the politics of all of these countries, where these countries trend a hard right because they are responding to this kind of immigration influx, which screws up the politics of Europe. Now, Europeans don't look at this and say, okay, well, America screwed up our politics. We have all of these people coming into the country because of the wars that America is involved in. Europe doesn't say that. They keep their mouth shut. They just take them in and accept the damage from it. This war with Ukraine, again, the energy reserves, something that Europe needs. I mean, the pipelines and everything else. Energy is expensive in Europe because, for the most part, they're not making their own in the way that America is making their own, or in, some of the Muslim countries, or I should say the Middle East. And yet they allowed the U.S. to get them to pass sanctions to eliminate the oil that they were able to get from Russia that was inexpensive. Now, the truth is, they were still getting it from Russia, but they were paying a markup going through Saudi Arabia. I guess my point is they allowed all of this to take place. And now Trump, either with Canada or with Europe, is now telling them, I need you to spend more money on NATO. I need you to go up 5%. Now, they weren't even paying 2%. He's now saying 5%, because what Trump knows is that when they spend that money, the money that they're spending, 70% of it is coming to us to buy our weapons.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
What the hell? Like, do you think that at some point they get a backbone? They say, okay, this is too much. Like, even us, even we at this lowly spot have some sort of backbone. We have some dignity in ourselves. You can't push us around like this. Because at this point, it seems like they're perfectly okay being pushed around. This is humiliating, especially, and not just humiliating, damaging to the people in Europe. Like, think of the businesses that are leaving Europe because they can't afford the energy costs. Or think of the salaries that might be going down because they can't, because of the businesses that are closing up. There's a reason that these political parties are going to the right. There's a reason that Schultz is going to lose, or Macron lost all of those races, or at the very least his party lost all those races. There's a reason for that stuff. Give me your take on that. You as a French citizen, like you were pointing out, well, not French citizens, but I know what you mean. You voted in an election. How do they see it? Like, because I never understood why Europe was okay with it. And maybe you can tell me why they're okay with it.
Well, I mean, I know more about France because of my family association with the French, and I've been there a lot more than other European countries, which I have been to, but many others, but certainly France. Look, I don't think everybody's okay with it. I think a lot of Frenchmen are not okay with it at all.
Yeah.
Jean-Marie Le Pen, right, the founder of the National Front, which
He just
became the
died.
National Rally under
Yeah.
Marine Le Pen. He just died a couple of days ago, 96 years old. And
They celebrated it in France. Did you see that?
Pardon?
They celebrated it in France. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the French people really did pull together against him when he made it to the first round in the presidential election. Now, the thing is, though, I thought it was super interesting that his death took place at this particular moment in history. And I think Marine Le Pen is the person to watch in Western Europe now as a bulwark against not just Trumpism, but really just like the American, hegemonic influence over Western Europe.
Right.
She will likely be president of France in 2 years. And when that happens, I think you're going to see a big pushback. She represents French nationalism, old school, like 1950s style, like, hey, thanks for your help on D-Day. Bye. We don't need you. And I think if you see that example succeed in France, it's going to spread to other Western European countries, not least of which would probably be Italy and Germany. And it's going to be a big deal. I think the resentments have been building for a long, long time, and Trump could end up pushing this. It's one thing to be the dog; it's another thing to be called the dog. And like they're Trump's rubbing their noses in it, and it's like, I think a lot of Europeans are really not satisfied with the sort of the post-70s technocratic leadership model that we've seen there. I mean, basically, just it's like basically it's just like Mitt Romney's running, the whole continent. It's it kind of just sucks, and so I don't think it'll last. I mean, no, Europeans are they know their history. They have their histories are many times longer and richer than ours. They're nuclear powers, many of them. They don't need to take this, right? I mean, they shouldn't. They don't have to, and they're doing it by choice, as you say.
Trump is treating him like Chris Christie. Do you remember when Chris Christie was standing behind Trump, and they were making all of these memes of Chris Christie's face because he just stood there for 15 minutes as Trump spoke, and the way he used to say, "All right, Christie, go ahead," like he would like fan him away. I mean, he treated Chris Christie like he was a servant or something. That is the way we treat them. Yep. That is the way we treat them, and for all intents and purposes, they accept it. Like somebody called it the year of humiliation, and I think they're right. I want to go to this clip by The View. This is my guilty pleasure, and I want you to hear them talking about January 6th, because they're making this case that January 6th is up there in importance of Pearl Harbor, of the Holocaust, of I want to get your take on it. They put in the Holocaust as this is the level to which January 6th exists. I want to get your take on this clip. I mean, the stuff that they say on The View is fascinating to me.
I think we need to find moral clarity, in this country. And I just remember after January 6th, you had someone like Mitch McConnell placing the blame on January 6th where it belonged, squarely on Donald Trump's shoulders. And then you started seeing people backtrack that and losing their moral center. You had Condoleezza Rice, I believe, on this very show saying, we need to move on from January 6th. I say no. You don't move on, because January 6th was an atrocity. It was one of the worst moments in American history. And when you think about the worst moments in American history,
Just to pause for a bit. Keep in mind, she's saying this when she voted for a person who was committing an atrocity in regards to the genocide taking place in Gaza, meaning Biden, Harris are presiding over what all of these organizations, pretty much every organization, human rights organization, has come out saying is a clear genocide. The International Criminal Court has put an arrest warrant out for Gallant and Netanyahu. The ICJ is calling this a genocide, meaning all the way down the line, all of these groups are saying this is a clear genocide that the U.S. government, Israel, is effectively presiding over. I'm saying the U.S. government because we paid 70% of everything that is taking place. They couldn't do it without us. She was fine backing a candidate that was backing a genocide. That is an atrocity. January 6th is something else. Meaning, I get January 6th is bad. Don't call it the Holocaust. Don't tell me it's equivalent to genocide that's taken place where 40, 50,000 people have lost their lives, or these rape camps and everything else that's taken place in these prisons. Don't tell me that and act like these things are somehow simultaneous, because the fact of the matter is she's not complaining about that or that her candidate is backing that stuff. She's complaining about January 6th, which, as bad as it was, it's not a Holocaust. It's not an atrocity. It was a riot. There was more. In fact, there's more to this clip. I'm sorry. The things that they say are just sometimes outrageous to me. I'll let it finish.
Like World War II, things that happened, like the Holocaust, chattel slavery. We need to never forget, because past becomes prologue if you forget any race. I want to ask you, I think we need to find...
According to her, January 6th is like chattel slavery. It's like chattel slavery, not just slavery, chattel slavery.
Wow.
Not just the very specific American brand of slavery. That's what January 6th is like, and the Holocaust. So January 6th is like, what, 10 million Jews being put into camps and tortured and everything else, let alone the other, 40 million Russians or 30 million Russians that was involved. Like, this is outrageous.
Yeah. January 6th is a riot. It's a low moment. It's a bad look. There's a lot of other, I would say, lower moments in, that even compare. I would say the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago would be a worse moment than January 6th by far, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say the assassination of JFK was a lower moment by far. I think it's escaping me right now. Was it Lincoln, Nebraska, that had the
school shooting?
Right. 100 years ago, right, where they burned down a black and massacred a bunch of black people in a.
I was thinking the riots at the Arkansas campus or some campus where there's a famous iconic picture with the woman laying over her body and she's
Kent State.
Kent State, thank you.
Yeah, Kent State. Yeah. I mean, 4 dead in Ohio, right? That's more than died on January 6th. So and it's far worse because it was on purpose. I mean, it was like it wasn't like a thing that got out of control. The governor told the National Guard to kill some students, and they did. So I mean, I'm just saying there's like it's insane. But the thing is, the voters have been very clear here. Don't let go of January 6th. She's blaming Condoleezza Rice. It's like, I'm not a fan of Condoleezza Rice, but Condoleezza Rice is right tactically from the standpoint of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. No one cares about January 6th anymore. The voters made that very clear in November. It's not important to them. It's not, and I don't really think it should be important. We have bigger issues, as you mentioned, our support for Israel against the people of Gaza. That's a great example of a far more important issue. I could enumerate them. We all know what they are. It's just that, this is something that happened 4 years ago. It's, not a great look. Maybe shore up the security a little better next time you count the votes and leave it at that, right? I mean, it is, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, this is like militant Democrats gone wild kind of.
It is.
And they're living in their own echo chamber. It's not unlike watching Fox, except, on the other side. And they stir themselves up over. Reminds me when Republicans were going crazy over Benghazi. It's like, why does no one care about Benghazi? Because no one cares about Benghazi. Should they?
Right.
Maybe, but they don't. And it's like, to paraphrase Donald Rumsfeld, you go to an election with the electorate you have, not the electorate you wish you had. And the electorate that you have does not care about January 6th. And maybe they should, but they don't. Let it go.
So true. God, man, so true. I mean, it tells. I often say what you say often says more about you than it does anybody else. And the fact that they're so harping on this, it's look, I get it, right? It was, you had a riot at the Capitol that was trying to prevent a candidate from ascending to power, effectively certifying the election. Again, fair enough. I totally get it. It is shocking, especially when it's a kind of a Democratic leader. But this is something that they have like latched onto. And they have spent so much time screeching and screaming about January 6th. I think the thing is, this is a Democratic issue. And I think you're right. This is something that they've latched onto, like Republicans had latched on to Benghazi. It's like, yeah, it's important, but, should it really subsume everything else that you're effectively thinking about? And Democrats spent 3 years banging on this particular drum about January 6th, Donald Trump, he's going to be a threat to democracy, all of that stuff. And the public still voted for Trump. Carville seems to be, at the very least, trying to get his head on right. And Carville, listen to what Carville said, because I think Carville is right here. And he's kind of echoing a bit what you just said, like, dude, leave it and move on to other more important issues. This is Carville. If I can get to him, there we go.
I'd say, well, first of all, I totally agree with that person. It's very depressing. But if you're doing political strategy, if you have an airplane crash, you got to go back and find out what went wrong. You don't say, well, let's just forget about it and move on. No, it was the flap set in the right setting, or, was there something that the pilot didn't pay to? I don't know, but it is sort of depressing. But, Michael, there's a simple, basic rule of politics is voters want an election about them. They don't want an election about you or your opponent. And for too much, we lost that. I lost it myself. We made it about Trump, and we didn't make it about voters. And that's it's never a good idea. And how could I, at 80 years old, been doing this for 50 years, lapse into that level of stupidity? I got to ask myself. And
Jamal, you're muted.
That is fascinating. Oh, there we are. That is fascinating. Because Carville is effectively like, I got sucked into an echo chamber. And, we made the election about something wrong about Trump. We should have been making it about voters. I myself got worked up into that. We need to have an autopsy. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, he's right.
He's totally right. I mean, he's undeniably right. And I just want to parenthetically say that it's awesome that his backdrop is his bar as opposed to the books that he supposedly read. But I'm like, I want to know what he's got back there. I don't agree with his politics, but he's too far to the right for me. But I do like James Carville as a person. And he is right. I mean, obviously he's right. Yeah, I mean, you can get obsessed over something and just be like, well, I mean, we've all done it in our personal lives and at work.
Of course.
But it's like, at a certain point, it is what it is, right? And it's, and I always want to, by the way, just as a parenthetical for J6, if that had worked, that was not going to make Donald Trump president.
Right.
It was like a childish, kind of mini riot, micro riot, right? Like this sort of like, if they had gone in there and somehow banged Nancy Pelosi's head on the desk and been like, you gotta certify the vote for the Donald instead. And let's just say they had, that doesn't make him, it's not like, hitting that one spot on the Death Star that makes the whole thing blow up. It doesn't work that way.
It would have never worked.
It's not a revolution. It's not, in other words, it's not even an attempted revolution, because had this actually worked, nothing would have changed.
Yeah, you might have hung Mike Pence, but that wouldn't have stopped, that wouldn't have stopped Joe Biden from taking office. I agree with you. And look, Carville is far to the right, fair enough. But I think Carville, more than anything else, wants to win. And I've heard him say before, right? He says, look, elections are not about making people feel good. Elections are about winning. And in winning, there's certain policies that you go with that tries to pull the public. Meaning, I think he said one day, there's some people who are okay losing if they can be moral in their loss. Like this kind of, well, I lost, but at least I fought the good fight. He was like, that is not of what elections are about. Elections are about winning and then affecting policy. None of this, feeling good about losing nonsense. So of anybody, weirdly enough, he seems to be the one that seems to be like, we need to make a change. Something needs to be different. Something is not working right in the way that we're thinking about this stuff. We made this too much about Donald Trump when really we should have been making about voters. Thank you, Carville. I appreciate that.
And we made it about, and they made it also about their first Joe Biden, never mind that he's so old, and then about Kamala Harris. Look how cool it is that she's a woman of color. And I think a lot of people were excited by that. And I think it probably like got her in, some people held that against her, but other voters liked it and it helped her. I think it was probably ended up being a wash really in the end. But it's like, again, it's kind of like, they resurrected at the beginning of Kamala's campaign, the old Hillary Clinton hashtag, I'm with her. I remember yelling at the TV, like, it's not about like, we're with her. She's supposed to be watching our back. She's supposed to be for us. That's why the ad that everybody talks about, even though I don't think many people actually saw it, that Trump put out was the, anti-trans ad, right? She's for they, them. Donald Trump is for you. Was like, but it was very powerful as a message. And it kind of, I don't really, I think it's one of those things that like probably fewer people saw it than you think, but still, that was the tenor of the campaign, right? Not that so much that she was talking about trans stuff, but that, it was about her and the Democrats and, but it wasn't about like the voters were, and it was like, well, we'll just, you'll get over it. The prices are not going to keep rising quite as fast at such a high rate forever. You'll be fine. And it's like voters are like, I'm not feeling fine and I don't feel good. And it's like, so, I mean, and really seriously, and Donald Trump really didn't address a lot of these issues either, but Donald Trump didn't win. Kamala Harris lost. It was hers to lose. She was the incumbent. Donald Trump's been convicted of 34 felonies. He owes $500 million to Jean Carroll. I mean, Donald Trump was a grievously wounded candidate who should have gotten 33% of the vote. Under any normal circumstance. I mean, I think, I think Michael Dukakis would have wiped the floor with him. It's like, so she really she completely, it was suicide. And I don't even know. I think it'll be interesting if we ever get a behind the scenes look at that campaign to see to what extent she was just told to do this. And inside she was chafing and she knew it was wrong. But they told her to do it anyway. The DNC.
Wait, what do you mean? Told her to do what?
Told her to not run, to not campaign for 40 days, for example. That kind of thing.
Oh man, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean,
or was it her?
See, when Kamala Harris, we have to close it. But last time when the Kamala Harris ran, she also ran a horrible campaign, if you remember, because she ran out of money. I distinctly remember this. She ran out of money before she got to the thing, and she was like, "I'm out of cash. I'm broke." And they were effectively saying she was in all this extravagant spending, the flying in the aircraft, like she was living the life in the way of her own self-conception of how awesome she was.
Yeah, and when they do that, by the way, I always think, man, like not only are you squandering money when you fly private, like Jimmy Carter used to go back and talk to everybody and coach. Like those are votes, man. You're missing an opportunity to connect with voters. Each one of those voters is going to go back to their hometown and say, Jimmy fucking Carter came back and shook my hand.
Yeah, they're going to remember that forever. Yeah. Ted, man, thank you for this, Ted. Always appreciate you, man. Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist. You can catch Ted on TMI, Too Much Information, on YouTube, Monday through Friday from 10 to 12. He is coming up after this show. Thank you, my man. You have a good one, Ted.
Have a great rest of your show.
You too. Thanks, man.